Welcome to Realm IQ Sessions, featuring conversations on AI with AI founders, AI leaders, and experts from around the globe, covering the intersection of media, technology, Hollywood, and marketing. Please give us a follow or subscribe. This is our host, Kurt Doty.
Welcome, everybody. Let's get into it. This episode kicks off our season 3, if you can believe that. And I am excited to introduce today's guest, Cris Moore, a professor at the Santa Fe Institute, and prior to that, professor at UNM with joint appointments in computer science and physics. He's also a prolific writer of over 170 papers on the boundary between mathematics, physics, and computer science. We met this week for the first time, centering a conversation around establishing some laws around AI as our state legislators are here in town. Welcome, Cris.
Kurt, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So, yeah, we had a great conversation. I love what you're doing, and you're probably one of the more, I hate to say geeky, yes, that I've had. And that's good. I love geeks. And certainly your work.
It's an old circus term, you know.
Is it really? Oh, yeah, preach the geeks, right? Yeah. But I certainly have an affection for geeks. I've worked with a lot of developers over the years and appreciate the perspective of and the brain that I don't have for it. Much respect. But tell us a little bit more about what you're doing, what you're teaching, and how that led into your interests or advocacy around AI.
Yeah, so I taught at UNM for a dozen years, and mostly for the geeks, data structures and algorithms and theory of computation. And, the students at UNM a lot of them are just very hardworking people. I had some great adult students who had come back to college, or in some cases going there for the first time, who wanted a career in computer science. So then some time ago, I came back to the Santa Fe Institute as a full-time faculty member. And there, I would say that my day job, again, is mostly theory, mostly on the whiteboard and computational experiments. But I did also get involved a couple of years ago in auditing a risk assessment algorithm, which is being used to advise judges about whether a pretrial defendant should be released or not.
Wow.
So, so this is like you've been arrested, but you haven't had your trial, or actually, since hardly anything goes to trial these days, you haven't copped to a plea deal or whatever. And the question is, in the meantime, since you have not yet been found guilty, do we let you go and go about your life? Or do we detain you? Or do we let you go with some, something ranging from checking in with the police every week to wearing a GPS anklet? So, this is an area, the criminal justice system is an area where AI is increasingly in use, for better or worse.
Yeah.
And
implicit and explicit bias involved, right?
Right. So all AI, all machine learning is fundamentally based on looking at data from the past, the so-called training data, whether that's text on the internet or the behavior of a database full of pretrial defendants from other times and places, looking for patterns of various kinds in that, depending on the architecture of the AI. And then if you ask it questions about the future, about a new defendant, a new applicant, well, it applies those patterns. That's what it does. That's what it's for. And it's very good at that. So there was a lot of concern that, since there is historical bias in our justice system, that if you train a system based on biased data, that it would find biased patterns and propagate those into the future. And that this in some ways would be, maybe even harder to fix and diagnose than with human decision makers. So that was one argument. On the other hand, if I could go back in time and replace a Jim Crow judge in the South with an AI, I probably would do it, right? So,
Yeah.
I mean, for me, the issue is not that AI is bad and that humans are good. The issue is that unaccountable, unjustified decisions, especially about people and their liberties or their livelihoods, are bad.
Yeah.
And that as much as possible, the decision-making processes in our society should be transparent, should be, something that independent observers can understand and check. And so where I came down on this after a while is that it's not that AI is bad, it's that black boxes are bad.
Hmm.
And
Can't see into what's going on.
right,
The
exactly.
human-centered approach as it's making these judgments.
Right. And of course, humans can be black boxes too. I mean, psychologists tell us that we often don't know ourselves why we made a decision. And when you ask us why, we make stuff up, which makes us sound a little bit like Chat GPT.
Yeah.
Um, but at least in the legal system, we try to create some, you have to write down some kind of argument. Um, so anyway, uh, this for me was kind of the beginning of getting into the real world of AI, how AI is being used today to affect people's decisions about whether you get an apartment, whether you get a healthcare procedure covered by your insurance or not, um, you know, whether you get a loan. I mean, virtually all of these things are now partly driven by AI,
Yeah.
sometimes with human oversight, sometimes without, sometimes with human oversight kind of on paper, but the human kind of ends up rubber stamping it.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So in this legislative session, and this is what we had the conversation about the other day, Representative Christine Chandler from Los Alamos and a couple of others have been carrying a bill. Another sponsor is Andrea Romero from here in Santa Fe, carrying a bill that would say, hey, if you are using AI to make consequential decisions, these things like housing, lending, healthcare, then there should be some scrutiny of whether that method is accurate and whether it's fair. Uh, is it overtly or covertly biased against particular populations, for instance? And if you are a developer or a deployer, a user of these systems, then there should be some attention paid to its impacts, and you should give consumers notice that you're using AI to make a decision about them. You should give them some explanation. If you say no to them, you should give them some explanation of why. Um, at the federal level, we have this thing called the Fair Credit.
Okay, sorry, but also
Yeah,
have to rebut or object to whatever finding.
exactly. So, like at the federal level, we have something called the the Fair Credit Reporting Act, FCRA, or FICRA, as they say. And this goes back to the civil rights era, because of course, long before computers came along, credit card companies and so on were using your credit rating, and we're using statistics to try to come up with these credit ratings. So it's actually a pretty interesting exercise. It's not hard to download this information. So the big, the big three credit rating agencies, it's interesting. It's not transparency exactly. They're not required to tell you how they calculate your score. Okay. So they're not required to reveal their algorithm, but they are required to tell you what inputs about you went into the score.
Okay.
Like, like, did you miss a payment a few months ago? Have you tried to open up too many new credit cards and so on? So this data is not hard to download about yourself. And then if you notice something wrong, like, hey, that's not me, then you are allowed to dispute that and get it corrected. And then they'll at least put that new data into their algorithm. So this is a kind of partial recourse for the consumer. Um, Again, it's still kind of a black box, but at least you know what's going into it and you can dispute that.
Yep.
Um, so I would call that a minimal level of transparency.
Yep.
Yeah. Anyway, so of course, big tech is out in force opposing this bill.
Oh,
Um,
yes.
alt tech and local tech and small business tech and so on are have been some of those folks have been very supportive. Um, so it's good to remember that big tech does not always have small business people's best interests at heart. I think the interests of Google and Meta are not the same as the interests of people here in Santa Fe, New Mexico, trying to build the high tech economy. Um, so anyway, that's where we are, and
Yeah.
the session is going to be over pretty soon. So we'll see how it goes. But if you like this idea, please write to your representatives and senators.
I'm 3 letters today. Um,
Thank you.
oh yeah. So I love the conversation about big tech versus alt tech. I talk and write about that a lot. Um, the same big tech leaders who have been in control of social media are the same leaders that are now in charge of AI.
Right.
And so, yeah, as they've stifled any regulation around social media, and we know the dangers and consequences of social media going unmoderated, unfettered, with no controls, we've seen the damage that has caused. Well, here's AI, which can be a lot more dangerous. They don't want any regulations around it because of the uh, the pendulum of innovation, meaning
Right.
either swing between innovation or regulation. And I believe there's a spectrum and a middle ground to hold these companies in check. And Biden had started to do that with his initiatives. Um, California, Governor Newsom enacted some laws. How they're going to be enforced, that's a whole nother issue.
Right.
Uh, and now, state by state, I'm hoping,
Yeah.
including New Mexico, that they can adopt something so that there are some guidelines, some guardrails to help in this process. And I really appreciate your advocacy because if big tech doesn't want it, the government is slow about it, then it really is left to the consumers who use it to be the advocates. And
Yeah.
we
Yes.
rise up, right? And force them to do something.
Yeah. I remember when in the early 90s, we thought that the internet was going to create this fantastic decentralized democratic world, where everyone would have access to all the world's information and there could never be any dictators again because their populations would be informed and connected to people across the world. And it was going to be great. Right. And I think it's really fascinating how, when you see some of these technologies, at first they seem like inevitably decentralizing and democratizing, but then they often get captured, centralized, weaponized, and you know, it, and often, to be blunt, it is sometimes a confusing mix. I mean, I get to read the opinions of a lot of people,
Mhm.
and through blogs and Substack and podcasts like this one, I get exposed to a lot of information which I wouldn't have had access to before. Wikipedia is great. Um, you know, uh, and so there are things like that, but there is also this relentless effort to capture things and to become the platform, the channel through which it happens. Um, and So, yeah, that's fascinating. And honestly, I don't want AI to be another force of inequality. I want it to be a force of, liberation, to be, I mean,
Equality.
yeah, I want these tools to be in the hands of many people, tools to create, tools to innovate, tools to study and understand and inquire, tools to design.
Yep.
And, so just to be clear, I mean, I think that there is a lot of potential there. And AI is increasingly in use in healthcare, not always with results as good as the vendors say they are,
Hmm.
but fundamentally, it's not a bad idea. Human doctors are often overwhelmed, and it's great to give them you know, direct access to the knowledge of, biological science and so on. It's great to, uh, AI is competitive with humans. Some people say better. There's controversy about looking at x-rays to see if you have cancer or not.
Yep.
Um,
Analyzing data, right? I mean, that's
yeah,
really good at and spitting out results.
right.
Uh,
If you know that that's what it's for, if you understand its strengths and weaknesses, right? Um, Yeah, but so what I'm worried about is like people using AI to read students' admission essays and saying, hey, does this person seem creative and do they have perseverance and grit? It's like, I don't really want you to ask an AI that
yeah, no.
question about an essay. Read the damn essay yourself, for Christ's sake?
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think that yeah, I just want people to apply some critical thinking about when we should use it, how we should use it in a given domain, if we should use it. And yeah,
Yeah, critical thinking. This comes up a lot. I've lectured at, art schools and universities and film schools, and I always ask the teachers, like, what should students be focusing on in their studies? Because it seemed like with AI, a lot of the grunt work can be done by AI, and what are the jobs going to be when they graduate in 1 to 2 years, if not four? And many of them say, well, we need leadership and philosophy and critical thinking, because, and that's really a reversal of this emphasis on coding, right, which has been between STEM and STEAM, girls who code.
right.
It's been an emphasis. Okay, you got to learn how to code. It's like, well, I don't know how to code, and I've been surviving in my career for a long time, and now AI, might replace coders, who knows? But what's needed is critical thinking, and not just at the level of people who are companies that are developing this stuff, but also the people who use it, right?
Right.
Because they have to discern and build their own vocabulary of, is this a hallucination? Do I need to check? Um,
I prefer the term bullshit, by the way. Yeah.
Yeah, when that term first came out, I go, "What are they talking about?"
Yeah.
And
Hallucination implies a kind of rich inner life.
yeah, or some transcendental type of
Yeah.
experience. It's like
No, but LLMs,
just lied. It just lied, right?
well,
Just
but okay, so there's this
oh,
there's a wonderful little book called On Bullshit where the author talks about, truth tellers and liars are both, in some sense, concerned about the truth value, the truth or falsity of what they're saying. In some sense, they're still both, even a liar is concerned about the actual state of the world.
no.
Whereas
It's like
he
uh,
describes bullshit. Yeah, he describes bullshit as just kind of uttering things for reasons that have nothing to do with their truth or falsity.
yeah,
And you know, I yeah, it's like people should know that ultimately what LLMs are very, very good at is emitting words that fit the statistics of all the words in all the text that they've been shown. And
Yeah.
that's surprisingly powerful, right? I mean, you can do a lot that way. You can practically pass the Turing test that way.
Mhm.
Um, and to the extent that that text has a lot of information in it, you're going to be good at repeating that information. Is it the same as understanding the world? My colleague Melanie Mitchell talks about that a lot. She's a real expert in kind of whether these things are thinking or not.
Yeah.
Um, they certainly have that illusion, but yeah, that's people need to understand that's what they're good at. And if you really want to know if what they're saying is true, you should at least back them up with other sources of information.
Yeah. Absolutely. But get back to critical thinking. So, um, the notion that this has the potential to make people lazy and stop learning, right? Those who understand philosophy, critical thinking, all those aspects of humanity and where this is all going and how do we survive as a species in all this chaos, no chaos. Um, you know, how do we not become lazy and recognize the fact that we still have to use our brain? We still have to guide these prompts with specific outcomes so that we stay smarter than the system that we're using and guide it with humanity and unbiased attention to what is the truth, right?
And we have to, and I think we also, right. I mean, you're in, I mean, you're a creative. And of course, here in Santa Fe, New Mexico, we have an incredible wealth of creative people, um, in film, in the visual arts and sculpture, music, everything. I mean, it's an incredible, we punch way above our weight in that area. It's wonderful. Um, I mean, how do you feel these things are affecting that world? So, I mean, I guess the optimistic view is that they're going to superpower us as creative. You know, there's a really interesting web comic called The Bestiary Chronicles, where this writer, it's a human writer at least, but then he used Midjourney to do the art, and he did it sort of as an experiment, and it's, you know, free on the web. It's really interesting. And these are good comic books.
Yeah.
Of course, the art it's good, and yet it's imitative of all of the style of all of the, you know, particular type of comic book. The the writer had to really work with Midjourney to create consistent looking characters and so on.
Yeah.
So the product is good. If you're a graphic artist, it's also a little worrisome. Um, so yeah, so the optimistic view is it's going to empower us, let people create things that they couldn't create before. Um, kind of the way like synthesizers and sequencers or whatever help people create music that they couldn't have
Right.
before. The pessimistic view is crap, you know, this is going to churn out lots of stuff which is going to be just good enough to eat up the market.
Yeah.
And it's going to be even harder than it is already for human beings who are trying to create something really new to get any attention paid.
Yeah. I'm classically trained as an illustrator. That's what I went to school for, and
Yeah.
so I have a lot of appreciation for draftsmanship, and certainly book world is. I mean, I studied under Bert Hogarth, who created Tarzan. Okay,
Oh my gosh. Wow.
30.
Dude.
I mean, deep appreciation for the skill of drawing, um, scene creation, layout, all that stuff. So, yes, these are tools right now. If you haven't checked it out, the Lore Machine is doing exactly what you're saying. With prompts, not only can you create a kind of a manga, comic book, but also animate it and like make a manga movie.
Oh my
Takes
God.
time.
those style frames.
Yeah.
So it's here. Okay. Um, Now, with
Right, but who's going to it's not going to invent a new
no,
genre,
no, no, no.
you
They
know?
still have someone with an idea. That's I want to
Right.
run something, whatever superhero that does this, and
Sure.
then you guide that. Right? So it's still human centered, creative centered, in terms of it needs someone driving it.
Mhm.
But what a fantastic skill to if you know enough about camera angles and how to prompt something to get an outcome that you wanted. Like, I want a worm's eye view of a dueling battle between these two superheroes, with a nuclear explosion in the sky behind them. You have to have an understanding a scene and how to break down a scene in order to recreate a scene. So you still need experts to guide that process.
But what happens when it says, "What hey, I've been trained on lots of films, and based on the statistics of lots of films," which, to be honest, a lot of films are kind of predictable in this way,
Have
like,
all been faked? Yes. Okay.
they've all been scraped. What if it says, "Hey, I'm the AI. I think a worm's eye view with a nuke would be just perfect here."
Yeah.
Yeah, so right, what happens if
Well,
it sort
yeah.
of replaces more and more of the process?
Yeah. Well, and it does want to be creative, right? I mean, you're asking it to be creative, and it does want to be creative, and it's proud in that it says, "Look what I did based on your prompt. Is this fine? Do you want me to continue to refine?" So, not that it's sentient or has an ego, but its role is to like understand and recreate whatever you've asked. Now, again, just through the lens of if I were a famous comic book artist like Mike Diodato, big fan. Um, can he use this tool to like make himself more productive? Or he's getting some rough layouts, and then he just kind of redraws some things based on some basic architecture that is supplied to him through his imagination and his prompts. I think he could supercharge himself. There is a lot of backlash within that community towards this stuff, and um, so it'll take a leader like someone like him to embrace it and use it in a way that he could really pound out more comics that are still his, that they're still hand drawn, but they're inspired, or it may replace the blue line process, right? Of the original layout, working
Mhm.
out perspective, stuff like that. That is tough work. Certainly, in a qualified draftsman knows that stuff and can just make it up, and it works and it's believable. And that is a craft. It's an art, yes. But again, these tools are there, so you're either going to get uh, getting into the space and say, I can do what Mike Diodato does,
Uh-huh.
or
Or
uh,
Mike Mignola or
yeah, well, all
yeah.
those guys. And they're going to say, hold my beer, and I'm going to use it. I'm going to say, I can do it even better. So I'm hoping healthy competition like that might help propel the format and help create new stories and new genres and
Mhm.
new type of visualizations that even these greats haven't been able to do before, either because
Right.
they're too overwhelmed with the normal workload or whatever. So yeah, I mean, yes, I am a creative designer. I'm a writer, and I use AI every day. I feel empowered by it. It's created a lot of opportunities for me to get
Mhm.
into areas that were just impasses for me before, based on you know I wasn't trained in certain things or didn't have the time. I knew how long things took, and they were just impasses, and now they're just done. And I
Yeah.
can amplify my point of view, my stories, my writing, whatever, in a way that I could never do before. So, I have an inner conflict. Should I even be using this stuff? But I'm optimist, an AI optimist, and I think it is fantastic. There's these fantastic results. I think the things that are happening in video are just freaking amazing. Will there be an AI movie anytime soon? I don't know, but I think it's going to
Well,
affect the commercial world, short form music videos and commercials like nobody's business. So I think
yeah, I mean,
Hollywood
they're
has some time, but Madison Avenue,
yeah,
and ad agencies better watch out.
yeah. I mean, there was right. Remember during the campaign, there was a deep fake of a little girl in the flood in right, and
Oh
this
yeah,
was like,
take
and
care. Let's,
yeah, and this was just made from whole cloth, right? I mean, there was no little girl. um, it's interesting that there are a number of deep fake laws. New Mexico last year passed a narrow deep fake law saying that specifically for campaign ads that you can't show a person doing or saying something that they didn't do or say
yeah,
without their consent. But that law doesn't cover making a fictional little girl and showing her floating on a piece of driftwood in a flood. It also, since the only restriction was your own consent, it also doesn't prevent a candidate from making a deepfake of themselves saving people from the burning buildings in 9/11, right?
yeah,
So, um, yeah, and right. So, but anyway, on the creative side, I mean, I hope that's what's going to happen. I mean, that's also in the sciences so far. That's what's happening. It's powering us. It's not replacing us. Um,
yeah,
and will that continue to be true? In other words, is this just another tool the way sampling was in music, or you know, the way people create art using a digital pen instead of a pen with a nib?
yeah.
Um, and is it going to be a tool that expands human capabilities? That's that's the hope. But as you say, you know, if people come to rely on it in the wrong way, somehow, yeah, I don't know. But so at that level, these are not new arguments, right?
Right.
Although some people argue that this is qualitatively different, that it isn't just another set of technologies, that it's,
Well, I think what's hastening that is the speed at which it's happening, and whatever you're seeing right now is as is the worst it will ever be. Which means if it looks pretty damn good, it's just going to get better and better and better. It's not going to
mhm,
get worse. So I think that is what's fueling this notion of this feels different, right?
right.
That's a quote you get a lot
Uh-huh,
from interviews. Like it feels different.
right,
It isn't just like the invention of TV, the invention of the internet, which are major transformational uh, inventions,
right.
up creation, right? Industries. Um, this feels different for all these reasons we're talking about. But I think keeping the human at the center, certainly creative at the center, I think we can work through it. The things that us user can't control is what big tech is doing it, and
Right.
uh, unbridled uh, ambition to be the first at whatever in AI is just fueling this AI race, and I guess an AI war with China. War with China over AI, evidently. But yeah,
Yeah. I mean, right. I mean, just as social media could have been about communication and it turned into just being about clicks and ads. Um, in the same way, AI could be about creativity and insight and design. And that's not the same set of goals that uh that the companies are going to pursue. I mean, to be fair, I know some of the people at these companies, and I think they would agree with everything we're saying in this conversation, and they're excited about the potential for human creativity. they're not trying to do bad, but I think that the institutions by their nature are, well, they're about profit. And that's a different set of goals. It's not like this compared to the things we want, but it's sort of like this, you know. Sometimes people click on things because they're worth reading. Some not always.
Yeah.
I look, my wife and I look at plenty of cute cat videos. That's because we want
Dog-
to, you know.
You're cute too, by the way.
Yeah.
Dog.
Well, all right.
Uh,
Yeah. The dog.
yeah,
Some of
but
the dog videos are good.
yeah. So profits. So you can imagine that at some point, beyond charging $20,000 a month for an AI agent with open AI, they're very concerned about revenue and profit. And just like the internet was like, wow, I'm able to do all this stuff. It was soon about, clicks and ultimately Alexa and Facebook listening to your conversations and then serving you ads. That's all about profit. And they built that technology, right, to enable a profit center
Yeah.
uh, that kind of ruined what was a good idea and an interesting technology.
Yeah. One of the other bills which is moving through the legislature is around privacy. And, um, so like if you read the same blogs and magazines that I do, you already know this, but a lot of fitness apps that you put on your phone, you think they're keeping track of how many steps you take and how fast you walk. Many of them are also keeping track of where you go and then
Oh, yeah,
selling that information, selling that location information.
of course.
And, yeah. So, and I mean, again, I don't think there's any evil intent here, but give me a break. It should be up to me whether my location is being sold to third party data brokers that are going to sell it to other people who are going to sell it to other people for all sorts of purposes, not,
Yeah.
ads
Apple,
and
Apple enacted, that permission based,
right.
which is
Yeah.
a good thing from big tech because they recognize the abuse of that. But people need to be aware, right?
Right.
And I keep saying we are the data. It's not this abstract concept. Oh, OpenAI, they're scraping the internet, and it's something that happens in a far off land, and it's abstract. It's like no, we are the data now.
Yeah.
Guess
We're
what?
the product. Yeah,
With
exactly.
400 million followers, everything that we ask it to do, every result, it's all training on our interactions, you know,
Yeah.
uh, which some people think, that is synthetic data and eventually it will eat itself and then not be as effective with its results. But we are the data. We're the ones.
Yeah.
I just wrote a blog about we're the new slaves,
Well, so
and
there's,
for the privilege being, being scraped.
yeah. So there's a saying that if the service is free, you're the product.
Oh yeah, just like Google. I love
Yeah.
Google. Free. Look at all the stuff I can do.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, all your
Yeah.
stuff up on Google Drive. At some point, that'll be scraped,
Oh,
right?
I mean, when you use Google Mail, right? They say that they're only looking kind of at individual words, but they are certainly looking at, words to drive ads and so on. I mean, it's like if you give me the option, like, hey, if you let us sell your location information, you can have this for free, and otherwise it's $5 a month.
Yeah.
Okay, at least then it's up to me. Right now, if you are a savvy consumer,
Mhm.
you know how to manage all these permissions.
Yeah.
And but honestly, right. So by the way, this is another, I think, source of inequality that's going to grow in our society is that just that some people are going to be familiar with these issues and are going to be able to dig in and, even something like looking up on Reddit what a product is doing, and whether you want to use it or not. but you should not have to page through all of the small print in the user agreement that we all click on to opt out of these things. It should be, that's,
That's productive.
yeah,
Pinterest just changed their terms and conditions. They sent out an email. I have an account, and they said, we will be using everything that's posted to train our AI right there.
yeah,
And, so every artist is like, should I be putting my stuff on Instagram and all this stuff? So how do I protect my IP of my paintings or whatever? It's like, well, Meta and, and Instagram already scraped, already done.
right.
But now
It's,
Pinterest is,
it's already out there.
yeah, and that's a whole other discussion because copyright, intellectual property. It seems like that if you willfully put your stuff on the internet through posting or cataloging and on these platforms, that you want to be seen, right? But it's also you're giving up something by doing that. Uh,
Right.
Facebook is free, Instagram is free.
Right. Like what happens if every time a painting of yours goes up in a gallery, there are a million people walking around looking at who will walk through the gallery and then walk out being able to imitate your style. I mean,
Right.
that would be a different, that would,
Whole
that
art
would,
world is built on the shoulders of the giants through the ages, whether
good artists imitate and great artists steal or,
right, so, you know, if you're participating in the internet, you got to accept the fact that your
yeah,
work has probably been scraped. And
yeah.
unfortunately, I think you need to be all right with that. Uh,
I mean, I know that there are these proposals. You were telling me about these the other day about trying to give images and other creative works some kind of digital DNA that will follow them around and, be part of their provenance so that you know who generated it and when. And this would be helpful both for preserving people's intellectual property as artists. It would also be useful for avoiding misinformation and disinformation. The problem is that this is a very hard problem. I mean, you know, it's not easy to watermark an image in a way that I can't sort of cut and paste it on my computer. Um, that
yeah, it goes beyond that. It gets digital DNA is really not on the surface and not
okay,
identifiable.
yeah, you were telling me about a blockchain
Yeah,
approach to
blockchain
this.
solutions. There's companies working on this, which I think is
Yeah,
fascinating. Um, and trying to monetize it along that chain of use, which
right.
I think that's a new economy and a
Yeah,
new and altruistic.
it would be great if I had access to your art and if you got a royalty that you agreed to if I use it. That's um,
A
yeah,
social contract.
right.
Um, but that discussion came out of we need to be identifying deep fake images. And my argument is no, we need to be identifying all images digitally and show
Uh-huh.
up and track it and monetize it. It's not just the deep fakes. If you're going to develop that technology for deep fakes, great. Develop that technology to track every photograph and illustration uh, that goes through the internet and figure that out. Use AI to combat bad AI.
Yeah. It will be an arms race though, because there will also be people. It'll be a bit like cryptography, right? So you're going to have people trying to break the system. I mean, I, but yeah, I don't want to, I don't want to discount the possibility. I mean, and it's one of the better uses for the blockchain I've heard. So
Well, I mean, blockchain Web3 had altruistic goals. The idea of DAOs and digital autonomous organizations, those are empowering things where people could be their own countries and develop their own governments based on the rules that they set forth. Um, but unfortunately, the bad actors got in there, crypto and NFTs, and just kind of screwed the pooch. But there's still people working on these altruistic outcomes. So, I applaud them. I'm watching a few of these companies, and we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
Listen, we're getting to the end of our podcast. I just wanted to give you an opportunity. Is there any call to action you want to give to our audience, certainly as it relates to the efforts and advocacy that you're doing in your efforts to uh, help regulate AI? Please share with us any final comments there.
Well, I mean, for what it's worth, the bill that I've been working on with Representative Chandler is House Bill 60. It is called the Artificial Intelligence Act. And that is the one, again, it doesn't limit the use of AI in any area except these consequential decisions like housing and healthcare and lending. And even in those areas, it doesn't say you can't use AI because everybody's using it. It just says, please disclose the use to the consumer. Please, look at the impacts, look at the fairness, and look at the accuracy. And again, apply some of that critical thinking. And as you said before, give the consumer the opportunity to learn what is it about them which is driving the decision and to correct that if necessary. So, I mean, we're getting down to the wire, but if people want to look up, it's very easy to find out who your state legislator is. And by the way, we're not the only state looking at this, and it's a bipartisan issue. There's a Republican state legislator in Texas who's proposed a bill. A very similar bill passed last year in Colorado, our neighbors to the north and the east. And, nothing is going to happen at the federal level on this area for a long time. So kind of like with climate, this is just a policy area where the state legislatures are stepping up. And so there are also these privacy bills. If you want to speak to your legislator about that, let them know that you should be in control of your data. And, just companies should be honest.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Well, we'll see where that all goes, but thanks for your advocacy and your direction there. And thanks, Cris, for joining us. And thanks to all of you for tuning in and catch more of our Realm IQ sessions on your favorite podcast platforms. You can now follow us on TikTok, on LinkedIn, and now Blue Sky, people. Check it out. Thanks, Cris. We'll have you back.
Thanks a lot.
Welcome to Realm IQ Sessions, Season 3, featuring conversations on AI with AI founders, AI leaders, and experts from around the globe, covering the intersection of media, technology, Hollywood, and marketing. Please give us a follow or subscribe, now on YouTube, Spotify, and all your favorite podcast platforms.